You're listening to Overdoing It, the Rhode Island Library podcast. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Overdoing It, where our team of library workers dish about their latest reads, views, and passions alongside fascinating conversations with local luminaries. I'm your host, Tayla, and the branch librarian at the Oak Lawn Branch Library in Cranston, Rhode Island, and my pronouns are she, her. We have a special author guest today, so let's just jump right in.
Hello. My name is Tony Weaver Jr. I am an author, social media influencer, and trading card game hyperfixator. Today, I'm here to talk about Weirdo, which is my debut middle grade graphic novel that I call the Nerdy Kids Instruction Manual for Self-Love and Self-Confidence. And I use he, him, his pronouns.
All right. Thank you for joining us today. A little bit later in the show, we will find out more about Weirdo and about your experience creating that graphic novel. But before we jump into that, let's start off as we always do with what have you been reading?
I kind of dive around into different phases when I'm reading things. Right now, I'm in a very much like action adventure type thing. So Jujutsu Kaisen just ended. So I'm reading the manga for that. I have like maybe 40 chapters left. And I'm also revisiting the Pokemon Adventure, which is an oldie, but a goodie. Really strong storytelling there.
I've been buying a lot of Pokemon graphic novels for my library because they're very popular. And I don't know if any of them say Pokemon Adventure. My introduction to it was the show, like when I was a kid, before I even had a conception that like they do different things in terms of like animation in Japan. This was just like a show that came on Cartoon Network for me. And now, and like its lasting power and the fact that, kids are still super into it. They still want all the books about it. Is kind of wild to me in the best way.
I mean, Pokemon Adventure is just a very well-written series. It's from the early 90s, and it's intriguing to read it and learn kind of in real time that that in the 90s, there was a guy who was writing at a pacing that can compete with authors in 2024. Like in 1991, Hidenori Kusaka was just chilling. He was like, this is going to be heat. It's going to be heat for the next 3 decades. It's going to be heat. 30 years from now, they're going to be talking about old Hidenori. And he would be correct. It's pretty great.
So would you say that you primarily read like manga and graphic novels, or are you kind of all over the place?
So the way that I describe myself as a reader is that like my relationship with reading literature is directly connected to my writing process. As a writer, I can find the joy in any type of story. So if you look at manga that I kind of grew up on, you look at like a Naruto or One Piece, it's like cool, I can enjoy that. You look at things that are more kind of like human dramas, like my grandmother told me to tell you she's sorry by Frederick Backman. It's like cool, I can understand the human connection to that. You look at some of the kind of more advanced sci-fi themes in stuff like This Is How You Lose the Time War. I'm like, yeah, cool. I can find something in that. I kind of read everything. I just need to, at a base level, resonate with whatever that story is saying about the human experience. Like there's a massive difference between something like Princess Jellyfish and the story life of AJ Fikri. Like they're very different things. But I approach all of it with this point of view that there's something universal about the human experience that can be found in every story. So the stuff that I read is me kind of searching for that and listening to different authors' voices to see how they communicate that thing so that I can then go take it back to whatever I'm making.
That's one of the things that I think I really like about like sci-fi and fantasy and even like dystopian stuff is like what it's saying about humanity when we take humanity out of like the normal context.
So what I like to do, what I say about myself is I'm a professional hater. I'm a positive guy. But I'm a professional hater. Not that I do it on purpose. There's just something in my brain where I read a story and I go, this doesn't compute. It feels like there's a syntax error with me. And kind of in the heart of that discomfort, I find my own personal writing voice and perspective. So even in what you just said about how a lot of sci-fi and dystopia stories, where when we take humanity out of the norm, what does that say about what it means to be human? Very often I find myself reading things, not any of the titles that I just mentioned. Very often I find myself reading things and I go, you didn't really say anything. You didn't actually say anything. You just went, wouldn't it be crazy if, and then we just stop right there. We like dot, dot, dot. And we let like the violence or the fan service or the action choreography or like the spicy scenes kind of fill the gap for whatever that actual commentary is supposed to be. And to be honest, that's cool. Like I read the kiss quotient. Is that what it's called? I read the kiss quotient and I was like totally going in expecting some commentary on what it means to find love and human connection as a neurodivergent person. And that's not what I got. That's not what I got. But at the same time, like it's still cool.
Yeah.
Like it's still cool. But if I read it and I go, dang, I was kind of hoping for this. That's a little nugget to go, cool. So go write that. Take that, seal that up, put it in the evidence locker. And when you grab your notebook and you're like, dang, what do I want to write about? Go find that thing that you feel like is missing. I like to say that I write towards the deficit, like wherever there's something lacking in my general reading materials, not in any way because of a lack of skill or disservice from the people that are creating and writing the stories I'm consuming. It's just, if I read it and I find myself emotionally yearning for something that wasn't there, that's that little twinge in my heart that lets me go, well, now you know the next thing you're supposed to be writing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, like you said, it's not anything that they purposely like were leaving out. It's just like they aren't
Yeah,
you, so they can't contribute
exactly.
that aspect
Yeah.
to the world at large.
Yeah, when I was younger, I had things twisted. Like when I was 13, 14 years old, I read things and I wouldn't resonate with them. My thoughts would be, this is trash. This is
Yeah.
so trash. But as an adult, what I've kind of learned as I've grown is that just because something doesn't resonate with you personally does not mean that it's objectively bad. Just because someone didn't explore a concept in the way you would have explored it doesn't mean that it's bad. In fact, if everybody explored things the way that you would, it'd be really bad because you would have no reason to be a writer. You low key wouldn't have a career. If everything that you consume explored the things that you think it should explore, there would be nothing for you to add.
Makes a lot of sense. I guess kind of like to bring it to reading something and feeling like something is missing. And I don't know, like I like to give good book recommendations, but I've been like in a bit of a rut. But
Yep.
one of the things I have been reading lately, this year I've been trying to read more nonfiction. And so I finally read a book that I pre-ordered and received a while ago called You Will Find Your People by Lane Moore. I found her through social media. She kind of was like in the social media space talking about like how to be a 20 or 30 something year old woman who's like maybe not having the most traditional life trajectory when it comes to love and friendship and all of that. So, You Will Find Your People is all about like making friends as adults. And I was like really looking forward to it because I'm kind of in a part of my life where it's like I don't talk to the people I was close to in college as much anymore. I have a lot of good work relationships, but the personal relationships are in a little bit of a flux right now. And so I was like really looking forward to the book. And then it seemed like a lot that she was like, if you experienced a lot of trauma in your early life and therefore you did not learn the skills to make friends, then like I'm here for you. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that is very comforting and like amazing to hear. So it was kind of like a thing of just like, how do you make friends if you don't know the reason why you don't have any friends?
Yeah, I think it is interesting what specific needs the literature industry seeks to meet based on the books that they publish.
Mm-hmm.
So with Weirdo's a middle grade graphic novel. It's something that needs to go in the hands of kids. And even though suicide and depression rates among kids are the highest that they've been since we started measuring, there are not a lot of stories where people are overtly talking about mental health. They'll kind of like point at it a little bit, like they'll hint at it a little bit. You may get a book that's 300 pages long, and over the course of the entire book, you get that one sentence where someone's like, it's okay to not be okay. And that's it. Like, that's the book.
Yeah.
Or we lean really deep into the sadness of it. So we may have a book where over the course of 200 pages, we just watch all the different ways that a kid can be bullied and be sad. And then at the end, it'll go, but there's always something positive on the other side, on like the second to last page.
Yeah.
And critics will be like, gripping, heartbreaking, wrenching,
Yeah.
timely, necessary. And as a reader that's actually dealing with all these problems, I'm like, man, this didn't do nothing for me. This didn't help me at all. I don't need help being sad. This did not help me in any capacity. I don't like to place moral values of good or bad on literature based on how much it helps me. But if while I'm consuming media or when I'm reading something, I deeply feel like there was a gap or something that was not something that didn't serve me, I go, well, cool. That means that you need to make something. I mean, like, that's how I process it as a writer. You talk about loneliness, and the immediate book that pops up to me is Olivia Lying, the Lonely City: Adventures in the Art of Being Alone. I like that book a lot. I read it after a very difficult breakup, and it kind of helped contextualize for me my feelings. The core description of the book is that, like, so it's nonfiction. There's a woman. She was dating this dude in New York while she was living in London. They were in love. She sold her flat in London, said goodbye to all of her family, hopped on a plane to New York City, and within 2 weeks of arriving, their engagement had been called off. And she's in what is one of the most populous cities in the world, but she feels devastatingly alone and by herself. And over the course of the book, she uses artists like Andy Warhol, Jean-Michel Basquiat, I think like Andrew Homer, I think was one of the guys' names. But she uses their work because loneliness is a major fixture in their portfolio, and kind of adds in this like biographical elements of their lives, different clips from interviews of how they process loneliness and things like that. And I found that very, very helpful to look at different perspectives on human connection. Certainly more than the title that you brought up, I think. What I notice is that in middle grade, a lot of what passes for conversations about difficult topics is that for maybe 2 or 3 pages out of the book in very cryptic metaphorical panels, something bad will happen or some darkness will loom, and then we immediately move on to the next thing. We kind of jump to it. I've read many books that have been lauded on their commentary about abuse or addiction or about any negative thing that a kid might be dealing with. And then you go pick up the book and read the book, and of the 300-page book, it's present for like 5 pages. We don't really say anything about it. We don't really dive into it. And I feel like that does kids a disservice sometimes because they're certainly more mature than we give them credit for. I've been doing school visits over the course of the last few weeks, and I chuckled to myself because I was doing a visit where I was talking and a kid had a manga in his hand. He brought the manga to me to sign. Not like I can't sign it because I didn't write it. Like, it's a little disrespectful. And it was a copy of Jujutsu Kaisen, which I'm currently reading. He was in volume 23. I said, in volume 23 of Jujutsu Kaisen, there are cursed demonic spirits tearing people's limbs off. There's blood splurting everywhere. People are getting chopped in half like Kit Kat bars. And you are in the 5th grade.
Yeah.
You're in the 5th grade and you're reading that and you're enjoying it. And I love that for you. But I find it very interesting how that's what you're reading. But when I put forth a book about mental health, there's some hesitation from publishers about if a kid can handle that.
Yeah.
And I find it very interesting how kids aren't getting what they're looking for from Western stuff. So they just go into manga. They live in the manga section. I tell people it's not that Japanese people are better at telling stories. It's not that Japanese people are better at drawing stories. It's not even that like the Japanese market just creates better storytelling products. It's that they are putting out content that is not as constrained as the constraints that we put on Western authors. And as a result, it makes it very difficult for us to compete. Because if I had an action fantasy story where there were cursed spirits tearing people's limbs off, I don't think I could find any Western publisher that would publish it in general. Maybe Dark Horse, maybe Image, or like Macmillan just opened 23rd Street Books. It's supposed to be adult comics, but it'd be very, very difficult for me to get it published, let alone to get 23 volumes of it that are so ubiquitous to access that a fifth grader would have it in his hand.
Yeah.
It'd be very difficult for me to make that happen. I feel like the literature industry kind of cracks down on a lot of stories in that way.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And I think it also, kids will self-select. Like, kids know what they're ready for and what they're not ready for. But like, there also is, and I think Western publishers collaborating with Japanese publishers, and Japanese publishers like realizing that this Western audience exists of younger people, is like leading to more titles coming down the pipeline. But there is really like a lack of like titles for that age. Like, it's hard to buy manga for that age group.
Oh, what I'm witnessing in books is very much the same thing that's happening in film and television, and it's frustrating on both ends. What's essentially happening is Japanese people are fronting a lot of the risk in producing and developing these ideas. The manga that we see in the US is like less than 10% of manga that actually gets made in Japan. We kind of get the top of the top that is selected to be exported and translated. That stuff comes over here, and kids that read it just assume, ooh, all Japanese stories good, because they don't have the context that what you are getting are the stories that have made it through the pressure cooker of the Japanese publishing industry to actually get to a point where they're being optioned. And Western publishers, instead of saying, oh, there's a market for stories like this, maybe we should start developing some, are doing very similar things to what Western film and TV studios are doing, where instead of saying, oh, there's a market for this, we should produce more, they're saying, oh, there's a market for this, we should option more Japanese stuff. We should buy more. We should buy more Japanese stuff.
Yeah.
There's not really an industry framework right now that would allow a Western equivalent of One Piece or Naruto to happen. If any Western author said, hey, I have this story and it's going to be great, it's going to be at the top of the publishing list, I'm going to need a team of people working on it at all times. And I feel like maybe I'll be able to get it done in 150 books that are 172 pages long each.
Yeah.
Publishers would laugh them out of the room. No one would allow that to happen.
Yeah.
But everybody wants the next One Piece, though. And that's not to say that we need more like series that are thousands of chapters long. Sometimes it gets a little annoying for me. But if you look at something like Haikyuu, it's like close to like 43 chapters, or even you look at Jujutsu Kaisen. I want to say Jujutsu Kaisen is going to be about 25 books long, roughly, by the time it's done. Yu Yu Hakusho was 20 volumes, and Yu Yu Hakusho was still like very deeply beloved, Soul Eater, things like that. There's not a way for Western creators to really do that. Really, the closest thing that we have is like Amulet, maybe. And Amulet was 8 books over the course of 10 years. There's not as much flexibility for the different ways that a story can be told in kids publishing right now, unfortunately. They're cowards, the whole lot of them. Except for a second. They do some pretty funky off the wall stuff. Which is why I'm really grateful to work with them. But cowards, they want the payoff, but they don't want to take the risk.
Well, you brought up about Western TV and movies, so why don't we transition to what have you been watching?
I'm watching Fight Night on Peacock right now. It's like a heist limited series with a star-studded cast of Black actors, and it's pretty great. I'm having a good time. I'm watching a lot of car shows, which might be a spoiler for something that the public doesn't know about. I'm rewatching Yu-Gi-Oh!, Card Fight Vanguard, Gundam Build.
Card. I heard Card the first time, and I was
no. I'm watching card shows where the heart of the cards and the power of friendship prevail at all costs. I'm trying to watch Haikyuu, but it's so difficult to find the dub without having to pirate something. But that's kind of what I'm consuming right now. Very much like Fight Night is a very mature show, but all the anime that I'm watching right now are very kind of aimed at younger, card or toy centric. Like you look at your Beyblade Metal Fusions, all that stuff. I feel like that level of nostalgia is very significant. It represents something for a lot of kids. I was at a party at Anime NYC. I was at an official anime party for Anime NYC. They bought out this club. They had the DJ playing like remixed Kingdom Hearts songs, and they had covered the pool tables with Beyblade stadiums. Like
Ooh.
people were playing Beyblade in this underground bar in New York City. And I was like, this is the world that I want to live in. I might be interested in nightlife a little bit more if I can pull up and watch Dronzer lay some people out. That sounds great, actually.
Yeah, I actually have a funny story about Beyblades, which is there is a young person who lives right next door to the library. So we see that family pretty regularly. And I think they came over to ask me about it, and I was out. So this kid mailed me a letter that was like, "Dear Miss Tayla, can I please start a Beyblade club at the library?" And they even gave me a little picture. Our audience will not be able to
Oh, I
appreciate
see
this,
it.
but
I
you
see it.
will. Yeah. So they drew me a little picture, so I kept it because it was like one of the sweetest things that had happened to me in terms of like patrons initiating the interaction with me, not me just being like, "Hey kid, you want to read some graphic novels?"
Put the picture back in frame. Is it bad that I feel like I recognize what Beyblade that is?
I don't know anything about it except that it's like battle tops. But
Yeah.
I was like, unfortunately, like you can't use the program room and it'd be like an official program. But I did say, like, if you and your friends do want to come and play Beyblades at the library, that's fine. And they did come once and it was nice. And yeah, a thing that I was surprised about, because it was a thing that I remember being popular when I was younger. I wasn't necessarily like a fan of it because that felt at the time that felt like a very boy thing, and I was in like a very binary way of thinking about what things you're supposed to enjoy, like as an elementary schooler.
Which I mean, to your credit, is not your fault.
No, I know.
It's again, it's very cowardly. They're
Yeah.
like, we want to make toys for the kids. Like, cool, make toys for the kids. No, there are boy toys and there are girl toys. I remember there was a commercial for a voice activated diary. It was
Oh
perfect.
yes.
And it was from this company called Girl Tech. Now, keep in mind, I'm a writer. I write things, even
Yeah.
as a child.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
write things. And I tell my parents, hey, I want a journal, a place where I can write things. And my parents are like, Girl Tech? Nah, that's for girls.
I remember that. I don't think I had one, but I definitely remember the commercials.
And that commercial was fire. That commercial was great. And I mean, like, boy toys are a little annoying because you get the action figure and the action figure's so stiff, it's rigid, they can't move. I'm like, bro, I'm trying to coordinate fight scenes here. And if girls get Barbies to have like all these points of articulation, her arms can move forward and out, and some of them, their like knees can bend. How is Goku supposed to do a Kamehameha wave and he can't even bend his knees, bro? In the show, he bends his knees. He plants his stance. The stance is very important. Why do the Barbies are more capable of doing a Kamehameha wave than the toys that you're trying to sell me? And I'm weird. Okay, sure. Okay. All right,
Yeah.
whatever you say.
But Barbie feet permanently in the high heel
Yeah,
position.
that's
Flat
true.
shoes, not for Barbie.
That's true. That's true.
That they even made fun of in the Barbie movie. I thought like that she was like, "Whoa, my foot is fully touching the ground. What's happening?" Yeah, the patriarchy. It's keeping us down.
Yeah, I think it I mean it applies to literature too.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've seen some people talking about Weirdo. I don't look. Like I may see something organically, I don't go look, but I've seen people saying like, is this a good book for a girl? And I'm like, since when is mental health a
Yeah, right?
what is mental health a boy only thing? Everybody needs it.
Yeah. Yeah, and also just like when is having been an awkward middle schooler gender exclusive?
Yeah, agreed. Agreed.
As someone who was also an awkward I mean, I feel like in hindsight, everyone feels like their middle school self was awkward. I don't know. Maybe there's some people who are like, nah, I knew I was cool. If so, God bless. But
I've met one person that's like, yeah, middle school, I rocked it. And he's a middle school math teacher. I was like, wow, you liked it a lot because you went back. That's wild.
he was like, I need to influence the experience of the next generation.
But most people that I know, they're like middle school. That was the bad part. That was middle school is the bad place, which is why I write middle grade media.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, y'all need something. Y'all need some support. You need you need somebody to pat you on the back and let you know you're okay.
So I think it's pretty universal experience for middle school to be kind of tough, which I guess leads us into talking about Weirdo. So to start at the beginning, for people who don't know, what is Weirdo about?
So Weirdo is a graphic novel memoir that chronicles my personal experience overcoming depression and anxiety and learning to love who I am. It's intended to be a helping hand for every young person on their journey to self actualization that'll help them come out on the other side happy and whole. That's the way that I describe it. So I mean, I kind of we start off with this concept of new kid at a new school. He's struggling a little bit, but we break out of those tropes very quickly and start having some very timely and important conversations about growing up, loving who you are, embracing your originality, and dealing with kind of negative thoughts and feelings that all of us have.
So would you say that Weirdo is like the book that you wished you had as a middle schooler?
100%. And it's also something that I've heard a lot. If you look at the reviews, a lot of people say, I wish I had this book when I was younger. I wish I had this book when I was younger. Like the way that I describe it is that it was certainly cathartic for me to write it, but I wrote Weirdo for the kids that are struggling and dealing with difficulties today. As someone that's made it on the other side of that darkness, I look and I go, why are we still having this problem? It's because no one's having this conversation. It's because nobody's talking to these kids about this in the way that they need to be talked to about it. So Weirdo is kind of me as someone that's on the other side of these problems that a lot of kids are dealing with, turning back and going, okay, I'm here to help. I'm here to support. Here's my attempt at doing so.
And did you ever have to deal with you wanting it to be something that is like imparting these lessons on younger people, like without being didactic? And like, how did you navigate that while you were writing it?
So I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm gonna toot my horn a little bit. Uh I didn't struggle with that because I'm built different. I'm built
Okay.
different. All right. What I say is that like writing is the only thing I'm good at, but I'm darn good at it. Is what I say. So in putting the book together, I don't necessarily think it's something I struggle with. Someone might hear this and go, "Well, someone needs to tell them," because I read it and definitely didactic. Like so be like, I don't know who told him, but I read it definitely didactic. Um, but I think that as a storyteller, I thrive on finding opportunities to incorporate different lessons and ideas in ways that don't feel preachy or don't feel pushy. I consider every story is a conversation. Each character has a point of view that contributes to the overall argument, and in a successful execution of a story, as our characters interact with each other and the world around them, we kind of get this ping pong back and forth that progresses us to this ultimate point of realization in a way that doesn't feel forced or overwhelming for readers. So I think I do that pretty well. And ultimately, what I'll say is like the big struggle that I had with Weirdo was people believing that it was a story that people needed or a story that people would resonate with. When we went on submission, there were a variety of publishers that got back to me and said, hey, we would love to maybe submit an offer if he adjusts or changes the outline for this. Like they would read the outline and say, here's an issue that I have with the outline. Change it, come back to me, I'll read it again, and then maybe I'll give you an offer. Was the idea. Whereas Macmillan from the beginning was pretty confident and communicated, I like it, let's get going. And kind of trusted that even though there were some things that were going to change along the way, that the core idea was strong. I was fortunate enough to work with a publisher that trusted me. And everybody else, there are some people that said, change your outline, change your outline. And Macmillan was in the background, kind of like, let him cook. Hold on, hold on. There might be something going on here. But I think even Weirdo got acquired in late 2019. Immediately the next year, George Floyd happens, COVID happens, publishing gets punched in the gut. People start pulling back their orders on middle grade titles in particular. People start to get a lot more a lot more skeptical about how debut authors are going to perform. I mean, Weirdo's been out for maybe 2.5 weeks and we're already in our second printing.
Fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you. For me, I'm everybody. I'm like, I told you. You don't think I would have. Because here's the thing about me. I'm a good writer, but I'm lazy. I'm really, really lazy. So for me, I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have written it unless it was heat.
Yeah.
If it wasn't gonna pop, I would have never put it on the paper. I'm too lazy. I'm too lazy to operate in the realm of lukewarm. I'm too lazy to operate in the realm of like hot or cold. If I choose to write it, it will be heat. And so it will be. This is how I feel about my writing ability. So what's interesting is the launch of Weirdo has in many ways in many ways for people in the publishing industry, it's their first time hearing the name Tony Weaver Jr. So I'm like, let the story begin here. Pick up the book and hear the story of Weirdo. Hear the tale of Tony Weaver Jr., who overcame mental health disparity and learned to love who he was. And then over a decade later, overcame discrimination and general doubt in the publishing industry to produce a book that is taking the publishing industry by storm. And that was Tony 5 years ago. That was 2019, Tony. Everything that you're reading today is 2019, Tony. Imagine what 2024 Tony has up his sleeve behind all these card game shows that he's watching. I think publishing is one of those places, to me, it's something that I've observed now that Weirdo's been acquired. Publishing is one of those places where it doesn't really matter what you say you are. What matters is who your community says you are.
Mm.
So when I started writing Weirdo, there were people in the publishing industry that took me under their wing immediately. Jerry Kraft, Jason Reynolds, Jared Krasaska, these people that are like titans in their own right. They kind of look down from the top of the mountain at like minuscule me at like base camp 1, being like, I'm on my way. And they kind of look down and were like, you know what? He might actually make it up here. And kind of step down and help me with, okay, so if you're trying to pick an agent, here's what I feel like you should be doing. Okay, if you're putting a proposal together, here's what I feel like you need to include. Oh, you're struggling with this, here's what I would suggest. You need a blurb? Of course, bro. Let me read it. Wow, this is amazing. I have great things to say about it. So the people that are titans in the industry looked at me from day one when Weirdo was just a one sheet outline in my spiral notebook and said, this book is going to be something amazing. And this kid is going to be something amazing. But there are people in the publishing industry, people in the general book sales industry, whether it's like bookstore buying managers or anything of that nature, that are like, I don't know this Tony guy. I don't know this person. And unfortunately, we live in a world in which that like doubt begets more doubt. So in our first kind of sales cycle, Weirdo did not make the New York Times bestsellers list. So for Weirdo in particular, I will never have the honor of being braggadocious and saying Weirdo was an instant New York Times bestseller. And for a majority of people, they go, oh, it wasn't on the New York Times. I guess compared to all these other books that are on the New York Times, people like this one more. And I go, yeah, but behind the scenes, what you don't know is the New York Times comic and graphic novel list is once a month. Weirdo came out on September 17th. From the beginning, I only had 13 days to outsell everybody else's whole month. And trust me, I tried. I tried. But also, someone may look at that and go, "Oh, well, in the 13 days, he kind of couldn't. It didn't kind of cut." And I go, "Yeah, but also, the New York Times bestsellers list is a curated list. No one necessarily knows what goes into their decision. Sales are a part of it, but we don't know what the other part is. I could have sold, and they just decided no, and we'll just never know. But also, since we don't have a core idea of the sales numbers, there's a possibility that the first run printing of Weirdo for me as a debut author, there's a possibility that even if I sold through my entire first printing in that 1 week period, it's possible that my publisher did not order enough books in that first printing for me to have made the list, even if I wanted to, even if I sold out of the whole thing. There are so many tiny little factors at play that dictate whether something shows up on a bestsellers list or a USA Today bestsellers list or something like that, that the average reader or the average literature professional just doesn't know or take into account. All they know is, well, you didn't make that list. So when I go and I decide what I'm going to buy, I'm going to go buy the books that made the list. And what happens? The books that didn't make it don't, and the books that did make it again. So uh, I'm in this weird place on my author journey right now where I'm like, writing the book was only 30% of the actual work. I had to write the book and then I had to market the book. And now that the book is out, I have to make the community believe that my book is worth something. So Raina Telgemeier and Scott McCloud have a middle grade graphic novel that's coming out. I want to say next year, and I think it's called like the Making Comics Club or the Comic Making Club or something like that. And I read the announcement and I said, oh, that's going to sell immediately. I bet the first printing is like 500,000 books, if not more, because in the literature space, the name Scott McCloud and the name Raina Telgemeier mean things. And
Mm.
I feel like if Raina Telgemeier and Scott McCloud, if that book was coming out and it was their first book for both of them, if it was their first book and they didn't have like the decade's worth of accolades, I still feel like that book would be worth something. That book would mean something. But in publishing, for whatever reason, you have like one thing that people like or something performs super well. And then people affiliate you with that thing, and every other thing that you make or create is looked at through the lens of that thing. So Gene Yang, even though he's like deeply talented and super, super amazing. Dragon Hoops is my favorite Gene Yang book, but every Gene Yang book that comes out is going to be from the creator of American Born Chinese. Uh,
Yeah.
every time. And I think that in some ways, it's made our industry very unskilled at identifying stories based on their quality rather than based on whatever hype machine is behind them. There was a point in time where I thought that making the good book was enough. I did not know that I had to create my own hype machine. But I'm getting there. It'll happen.
I also want to second, I really enjoyed Dragon Hoops, but I also recommend Superman Smashes the Clan to a ton of
Mm,
people, like to already superhero fans or people who are like not really into graphic novels, but it's like, you heard of Superman, right? Here's this great book that actually has amazing historical context that doesn't always get touched on in books about post World War II.
yeah, I feel like Gene Yang is just super, 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 super talented. Love everything that he writes. He gets really experimental. And that's what I'm trying to be. I'm like put my face up there on comic Mount Rushmore. And there are a lot of people that are like, Tony, it's your first book. Calm down. I'm like, I know, but I got ground to cover. I got ground to cover because ultimately the way that these other people feel about you directly dictates how many kids you get to impact. Because if you put out a book, the book can be the most amazing thing in the world. But if the publishing industry at large is like, I don't know this guy, I haven't heard of this guy, or just buy more Attack on Titan, buy more,
Yeah.
buy the new Naruto printing. Um, Suddenly the book kind of gets sidetracked and kind of falls into the abyss. And I've seen that happen to many books over the course of the last few years. The quality books, they come out, the market's kind of crowded. They have some early buzz and conversation, but the momentum never really quite stays there. And next thing you know, a year from now, we're not popping up on any of the lists. We're not popping up on any of the, hey, here's a good book that you should read. Teachers don't include it in their back to school lists because there's no guide and things like that. And next thing you know, a book that you spent 2 to 3 years of your life working on suddenly exists in this void somewhere where you can get it off of Amazon or your Barnes and Noble or your local bookstore will order it for you if you're okay with waiting for a few days. And that's kind of the no man's land unless some book talker picks it up or some Twitter thing goes viral. And that's never the place that I want to be. So I'm trying to make sure that doesn't happen.
So, before we move on to our last segment of the show, if people walk away from this conversation knowing one thing about Weirdo, what is it that you want them to know?
Uh, with the most sincerity as possible, I will say that I wrote Weirdo to save lives. And I mean that. Stories saved my life. And I wrote Weirdo because I promised that as soon as I got the opportunity, I would use stories to save other people. Young people are struggling with their mental health. They're struggling to love who they are, look in the mirror. And Weirdo is very strategically formulated to help them in those circumstances. And it's my hope that Weirdo is a positive and beneficial tool for anyone of any age on their mental health journey. If you're a librarian or if you're a bookseller, I know that you have your greats, right? I know you have your people for whom the moment this book comes out, it's a must buy, it's a must stock, I must have it. And I can guarantee you that if you give Weirdo a shot, the name Tony Weaver Jr. will end up on your greats list. So that's the gamble that I ask you to take. You pick up the book and you give it a read, you won't regret it.
Fantastic. So we wrap up the show with a segment I call The Last Chapter, where we talk about a library or bookish related question. So I thought I would ask you, what is the last TV series that you binged the fastest? And if you're not a binge watcher, why not?
It's been a while. Very few things can hold my attention anymore. Um, like I'll watch something and maybe we get to episode 3 or 4 and there's some turn or twist that it takes that has me go, don't want it. Or not even don't want it. It'll just have me go, oh, that was nice. I'll come back and finish watching this later.
Yeah.
Only Murders in the Building on Hulu. They have a new season out and I'm waiting until it's done because I want to watch it all at one time. I binged every season of Only Murders in the Building. I like that show quite a bit. How do I put it? I am at the stage in my life where I do not value suspense as a emotion that I should invest any time or energy. So when people say like it keeps you on the edge of your seat from week to week, I'm like, I get no benefit from that. That means nothing. That means nothing to me. There are many things in my life. Like I'm a writer, I'm a CEO, I'm a voice actor. There are many things in my life that keep me on the edge of my seat. Am I going to get this audition? How will my editor feel about this next draft? Did this grant proposal that we submit get accepted? There are way too many things that keep me on the edge of my seat in everyday life for me to purposely choose to add another thing to keep me in suspense from week to week. It's just not an emotion that I get any value or benefit from. There are some people that are like, we need to bring back week to week. No, you don't. No, you don't. If you want to bring back week to week, let them put all 10 episodes out and you personally can make the decision to watch one episode every week for the next 8 weeks. If that's how you want it, you can do that. But me, when I sit down to consume, I'm like, it needs to be easy. It needs to be easy and it needs to be convenient. So I'm just going to watch.
I am usually not a binge watcher, mostly just because of time. It's like if I have time at the end of the day to watch 1 or 2 episodes of something, I'm happy about that. But the one, and it was probably like last year sometime. Oh, and I'm going to forget what the documentary is called. But it all revolved around this like one woman who was like a very normal woman, but that met like one kind of like metaphysical Wololo guy and then like fell down a metaphysical rabbit hole and then became like this personality that they called her mother and they like kind of worshipped her, that she was like communing with like the great collective spirits, which was like a bunch of dead Hollywood actors. It was wild from start to finish. It was like a 3 episode where like each episode was like an hour and a half. And we went into it thinking, oh, we're going to just like watch this episode and then maybe tomorrow we'll watch the next one. And then like we stayed up and watched the whole thing because we were like, this is too wild to leave hanging. Like I need to know. I just totally blanked on the name. I will look it up and it will be in the show notes. But I just remember that being like the one time that both me and my partner very uncharacteristically were like, we have to watch this till the end now.
We must keep moving. I feel like the Don't F with Cats documentary on Netflix had a very similar effect on me. As soon as I started, I was like, I need to get through all of this.
Is it's just about cats?
So Don't F with Cats is a documentary about this dude who posted an online video of him physically abusing a cat. And people got so upset about it that they made a Facebook group specifically dedicated to finding who he was and reporting him to the police. And over the course of about 2 years, it follows the major people in that group on their like very hyper specific journey to deal with this dude. And
wow.
the takeaway of it is don't F with cats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the kind of whole thing that like cats do so well on the internet.
Yeah.
Made the internet come
be
for
in
him.
trouble. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So where can people find you on the internet if they want to find out more?
So I'm at Tony Weaver Jr. on all platforms, and Weirdo is everywhere. It's at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, your local bookstore. If you go to a bookstore and they don't have Weirdo, honestly, that you need to ask them a question. Be like, what are you doing? If you go to a library and the library doesn't have Weirdo, you got to be like, what's going on here?
All right. Thank you for joining me, and thank you everyone for listening. If you would like to respond to our last chapter question or just reach out to the show, you can send us an email at overdoingitpod@gmail.com. And that's overdue, like all the books at my house right now, ingitpod@gmail.com. You can also find us on Instagram at overdoingitpod. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend and rate and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, because it helps us reach more Rhode Islanders. Overdoing It is proud to be a resident partner of the Rhode Island Center for the Book and is brought to you by library staff and community members all around the Ocean State. The project has been funded in part by the Rhode Island Office of Library and Information Services. So thank you again for listening, and this has been another episode of Overdoing It, the Rhode Island Library podcast. We're overdoing it, but you're doing just fine. That's kind of how I feel about horror movies. Like, I'm like, I already have anxiety. I don't need to buy problems.
Right. Right. 100%.